What if the same powers that once controlled your house suddenly knocked on your door saying, "Let's be friends again"? Would you open the door or check your pockets first? The EU has returned to Niger asking to re-establish bilateral ties with the country based on mutual sovereignty. Currently, the United States seeks a new beginning with Mali, a country that has recently distanced itself from France and strengthened its ties with Russia. But Africa has seen this movie before, and every time the ending looked good for foreign powers and painful for Africans. So today we ask the hard question: should Mali welcome the United States back, or is this another strategic trap? Let's be honest. Western involvement in Africa has rarely been about African prosperity. It has been about resources, influence, and control. After independence, many African countries were politically free but economically tied down through military agreements, currency control systems, debt structures, and security partnerships. Western powers kept leverage over African governments. These deals often came with conditions: who you could trade with, what resources you could develop, and which military partners you could choose. That is not full sovereignty. That is managed independence. Mali, like many African nations, has lived through this system, and when Mali's recent leaders began challenging old security arrangements and reducing French influence, Western governments became uncomfortable. Now the US says it wants to move past policy missteps and show respect for Mali's sovereignty. That sounds good. But Africa has learned something the hard way. When powerful nations say partnership, they often mean strategic interest. This is creating so much uneasiness amongst Africans who truly understand this concept of partnership, and they are asking why the US suddenly cares. Let's not pretend this shift is random. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are now cooperating more closely through the alliance of Sahel states. The AES has moved away from French and Western military dominance and has increased engagement with Russia. This changes the balance of power in West Africa, and it has given so much hope to Africans who care about true sovereignty and economic independence for the continent. The Sahel is not just desert land. It is a major security zone, a region rich in strategic minerals, and a geopolitical bridge between the North and Sub-Saharan Africa. If the AES becomes stable and independent outside Western security control, it weakens Western influence in the region. So when the US, just like any other Western power, talks about a new course, we must ask, is this about helping Mali, or is it about reclaiming lost influence in the region? There are some possible disadvantages for Mali in this whole thing. Africans can only hope and pray that the Malian lawmakers think this through properly before making any decision. The Malian government needs to remember that the AES is Africa's only hope for freedom at this point. If Mali reopens strong diplomatic and security ties with the United States, several risks appear. Pressure on sovereign decisions. US partnerships often come with expectations on military cooperation. Voting patterns at the UN economic policy directions and foreign partnerships. Mali could slowly find its independent foreign policy squeezed. Its relationship with Russia risks being strained, and the country loses the leverage and progress made so far, drifting back into desperation. Mali has leaned on Russia for security support after breaking with France. A renewed US presence could create tension, forcing Mali to balance between two global powers that can turn Mali into a geopolitical chessboard. Not a sovereign actor, it risks creating divisions within the AES. So far, the alliance of the Sahel states has been solid. The leaders of these nations have worked strategically together in a manner that has allowed no foreign intruder to destabilize or frustrate their plans to move the region forward. The alliance of Sahel states is built on shared resistance to external pressure and a desire for independent security frameworks. If Mali moves too close to Washington, Burkina Faso and Niger may question whether the alliance is drifting back toward Western influence. That could weaken regional unity, and divided African states are easier for global powers to influence individually. Mali, understandably, is a sovereign state and is capable of making its own decisions. However, it needs to remember that foreign powers always present a situation of security agenda versus development agenda, and this is often structured in ways that do not favor African development. In other words, Western engagement in the Sahel has historically focused heavily on counterterrorism, often at the expense of long-term development. If the relationship becomes security-dominated again, Mali may receive weapons and training, but not the economic transformation its people actually need. Why Mali should be careful. This is not a call for anger, bitterness, or complete rejection of diplomatic ties with any particular foreign power. It is rather a reminder to avoid the mistakes of the past. Mali should not reject diplomacy. No country should isolate itself, but engagement must be on equal terms, not from a position of desperation. Mali must ask, will we control the terms of cooperation? Will our mineral wealth benefit Malians first? Will our foreign policy remain independent? And will this strengthen AES unity or weaken it? Because history shows this clearly, foreign powers rarely give up influence voluntarily. They re-enter through aid, security cooperation, and diplomacy, then slowly rebuild leverage. If Mali does not define strict boundaries, today's handshake can become tomorrow's pressure. The Russia factor in the Sahel is one that strengthens regime protection but falls short in terms of nation building. But here is what Africa really needs: accountable African leadership. Russia's growing role in the Sahel is part of why the West is recalculating. But Mali must also avoid becoming dependent on any external power, east or west. True sovereignty means not replacing one controlling partner with another, but building strong internal institutions, regional unity, and diversified partnerships. The AES only works if member states trust each other and move strategically, not reactively. This moment is bigger than Mali. It is about whether African nations can finally engage global powers without surrendering control. The United States says it respects Mali's sovereignty. Good. Then Mali must make sure that respect shows in actions, not just speeches, because Africa's future will not be decided in Washington, Moscow, Paris, or Beijing. It will be decided by whether African nations finally learn to say, we will partner with you, but on our terms. Do you think Mali should trust the US again or focus on building power through the alliance of Sahel states and new partnerships? Drop your thoughts below. Let's reason together. Africa must shine its eyes. See you in the next video.